We will go ahead and bring Richu online. And presenter mode. Richu, you should be able to join us now.
Hi, Charles. Good morning. Can you hear me and see me all right?
We see you and we hear you. Absolutely. Yes.
Excellent. Let me initiate share screen.
Absolutely. I will let you take over the show. It is all yours.
All right. Give me an act if you can see my screen right now.
Yep, you are good to go.
Thank you. Good morning, good evening, everyone. I am Richu Channakeshava. I'm part of the product management team here at Palo Alto Networks focused on everything cryptography. And with me, I have Saad Khan, who's the senior TME, also part of the same organization, the PANOS team, responsible for SSL decryption and many more fun functionalities in post-quantum solutions. All right, with that, today's session is going to primarily focus on the best practices to enable and deliver a successful decryption program within your infrastructure, within your enterprise, as well as some additional features that we've brought to market in the last year and a half, which are around enhanced visibility as well as detection of post-quantum cryptography that's in use in today's SSL sessions. All right, with that, I want to kick it off with why should you decrypt? And many of you might already be decrypting SSL traffic in your infrastructure today, be it on the firewall or another location. But why should you really decrypt and why should you do that on the Palo Alto firewall is the focus. All right, so it might shock you to know that in the last 5 years, there's been a significant increase in encrypted attacks. Malware and phishing attacks are now notorious for being encrypted, making it easy to sneak into your environment, bypassing all security rules, especially when decryption is not enabled. So malware and phishing attacks, according to WatchGuard, have increased by about 94%. Phishing in today's age has increased by about 65%. Since ChatGPT came online, that's back in 2022, over 4,000% plus attacks are AI generated. It's a preposterous number to even wrap your mind around. So just become aware that as you move into the next few years, even in the next 5 years, you should be considering more malware and phishing attacks that are automated and have a very targeted approach to your organization. Ransomware attacks have actually been increasing in the last 4 years. Ransomware as a service is now a reality. It's available to anyone, anywhere with $50 up to 100,000 and more to be able to target an organization, be it a Fortune 500 car manufacturer, an actual nation government infrastructure can be taken down and has been in the last 2 to 3 years. So you should be very careful to consider a decryption strategy in your enterprise to be able to catch such attacks even before they make it into your environment. All right, with that, let's actually look at what can be detected without decryption. Known malicious domains in DNS, sure, should be all right. Without decryption, you should be able to catch those. What about expired or revoked SSL certificates? Should be all right. Again, the visibility into expired certificates starts reducing with TLS 1.3. If you were still on TLS 1.2, should have been okay. But with TLS 1.3, you know that server certificate is encrypted, and without decryption enabled, there is no visibility to apply CRL or OCSP checks. What do you think of zero-day malware in the web? If malware is encrypted, especially today's malware, which is leveraging SSL sessions, you have no access to that payload without decryption. What about URL filtering? You start to notice that the SNI from the client hello of the handshake is used to recognize a category of the URL. But if the client SNI is not available, then you're relying on server certificate's common name. Again, with TLS 1.3, a server certificate is encrypted. you're back to square one, no visibility or reduced visibility in this case, right? What about application controls? The top level domain like facebook.com is available to you without decryption, which is fine. But if you had to apply granular controls to a Facebook chat or a Facebook Live, then that level of classification is only available post-decryption. Now, if you look at spyware protection from connections initiated by a command and control, vulnerability protection against CVE exploits, you are looking at reduced visibility. This gets even more interesting now. Let's now think about detecting phishing attacks like credential phishing and links in emails. You have zero visibility to that. How about virus in files and executables like JavaScript or a PDF? Again, no visibility. Again, detecting URLs with where the client is using ECH, encrypted client hello, or the encrypted SNI, no visibility again. In all, what I'm trying to enlighten you with here is that there are many possible attack vectors that go completely undetected simply because the attackers are now using an encrypted SSL session. All right. So without a decryption policy or a decryption program in place, your visibility to actual attacks in your infrastructure is significantly reduced. What you think you are doing in terms of comprehensive security is potentially just 20% detection without decryption enabled. That's about 80% of your traffic that's going uninspected. So that's something to take very keen attention to. All right, so here what I did is I'm no expert in attacks, but here's what I did with the Log4j attack. I start off with a no decrypt policy just to make sure that we are able to actually log sessions, but I launch a Log4j attack. All right, so I'm just showing you the security policy rule is set to allow, the decryption policy rule is set to no decrypt. There's no traffic right now. All right, so on the left-hand side is my client, and on the right-hand side is a Spring Boot server, which is running the Log4j attack vector. All right, so I'm doing a curl to my server, and I have inserted the JNDI extension, which is basically the Log4j library attack extension. All right, and I go ahead and launch, and I receive the response from the attacking server, and everything looks good to go. You see that traffic logs are generated in a moment there. Yep, there you go. My traffic logs looks great. It's just logged that it wasn't decrypted. So no attack vector found. The session was successful. All right, session start and end. You see no threat logs detected either because there was no decryption enabled. Now we'll change that. Let's go ahead and change that decrypt policy from no decrypt to decrypt and continue to enable logging. And now the security policy itself doesn't change. I still have the same policy set to allow. But as long as a threat ID matches, you do know that the firewall is going to block that session, right? So even if the security policy says, is a simple policy that says allow all, as long as a threat ID matches, we will. So now I launch that the attack again. You see that the connection was errored. And now the session was attempted to establish twice. The client retried. So you see that 2 sessions are logged on traffic logs. You see now there's a threat log, which actually detected the Apache Log4j attack, critical severity. The session was blocked. All right. And here you see that it was detected because the session was decrypted from client to server. And you have the app characteristics or the actual threat ID characteristics. All right, so I hope that was a little informative into how attacks can go unnoticed when you're not decrypting. So now let's talk about where in the network should you be decrypting. In fact, on Palo Alto firewalls, we support 2 different modes of decryption. One is called the forward proxy mode, and the second is the inbound inspection, which is also a proxy mode. So in forward proxy, what you're looking at is you're looking at trying to secure your employees or your internal known client endpoints or known host machines and so on. All right. So what you're trying to protect them from is you're protecting them from the internet. So as these employee desktops or known internal host machines access the internet, you want to make sure that those sessions are intercepted, decrypted, inspected, and then allowed. And the response is also goes through the same path, which is intercepted, decrypted, inspected, and then allowed inside. The inbound inspection is different. The inbound inspection is where you're trying to secure your application infrastructure from the internet traffic that's incoming. So these internet endpoints are unknown to you. You do not have control over the internet users. You only have control over your application infrastructure. So you place a firewall right in front of the application infra to secure incoming traffic. So that would be called the inbound inspection. These are two very different use cases. Where your firewall is located matters as you start thinking about which endpoint are you trying to secure. All right. Okay, so with the forward proxy, what you're looking at is, as I said, internet is on the right-hand side, an incoming session from your known entity or known employee desktop. It reaches the firewall intercepts it, accesses the server, and actually reestablishes another session, which is called the server-side session, to the end destination server, receives the server certificate, inspects the server certificate, and once the inspection succeeds, only then will the firewall generate an impersonation certificate, which is signed by the enterprise CA, right? So for the forward proxy, let me complete the slide here. For the forward proxy to succeed, you will need an enterprise PKI or an enterprise CA established within your organization. I'm sure typically this could be your Microsoft Active Directory. It could be also a third party that your IT team uses, which could be like a key factor or a VeriSign, which is built for your internal enterprise PKI infrastructure, right? So with that CA certificate would have created a sub-CA, which that sub-CA now resides on the firewall, and the actual CA resides at your controlled endpoint devices, which is, it could be your employee devices, where you've pushed down that enterprise CA certificate. So when an impersonation certificate is created on the fly by the firewall, it is signed by that sub-CA, all right? And once that certificate is received at the employee device, since the employee device was pre-populated with the enterprise CA, it's able to match that certificate chain and the issuer and to verify that this is a legitimate issuer. All right. So that's how a forward proxy is set up. Without your enterprise PKI or CA, there are a few other ways where you can use self-signed certificates by self-signed and generated on the firewall itself. Our recommendation typically is to use an enterprise CA because self-signed is not scalable. It is perfectly all right to use that in a small setup or in a lab setup. When I say small, I'm looking at maybe 2 pairs of firewalls, which is local to your branch office, something on those lines. But as you start scaling your infrastructure, you need to look at an enterprise CA. All right. So some of the form factors which we support here today, of course, Prisma Access would be a great product for enabling forward proxy to secure your private connection users from either Global Protect or Prisma Agent, as well as the Prisma Access browser and so on. And then, of course, the firewall, the hardware firewall in a branch location, connecting employees connecting through the firewall to the internet would be another good location. All right, now let's look at what is SSL inbound inspection. In this case, the firewall is placed very, very close to the application. As you can tell, firewall is going to be impersonating the application itself, acting as the real server. So in this case, the real server certificate and key pair have to be moved to the firewall. The firewall will now assume ownership of the real server certificate and the private key pair, public-private key pair. So in this case, incoming sessions from the internet where the firewall acts as the server, and for the backend service or application, the firewall acts as a client, and that's how a proxy, it acts as the inbound inspection proxy there. This mode especially is used to inspect any incoming threats to the application itself. Here, we also have made sure that we support multiple certificates for the same URL or for the same SNI. So because now applications are not just a single URL path, you have multiple applications for a given virtual IP or for a given FQDN that are hosted on the backend. So we support up to 8 to 12 different certificates that you can bring in and attach to the same URL or FQDN group on the firewall. So as the incoming session SNI is mapped to the appropriate application, one of the certificates is used to make sure that that session to the client is successful. And for solutions, of course, our VM series is the more popular solution that we recommend, for any inbound inspection proxy. And our hardware firewalls in the mid to high tier range are able to scale for the throughput and your session requirements for your application security. All right. With that, let's jump into some of the ciphers and protocol highlights. What I want you to take away from today's session primarily is that as you start thinking about your decryption program and your decryption strategy, you should become aware that you're not just decrypting for detecting payload threats. In fact, the industry has evolved to a point that protocols are now encrypted. So TLS 1.3 as a protocol was introduced about a decade ago, came into absolute adoption maybe in the last 5 years, 5 to 8 years. And as you can tell, TLS 1.3 only supports exactly 5 ciphers, and all 5 ciphers are perfect forward secrecy enabled, PFS, which means ephemeral keys are generated for any single session that's established, and you cannot actually do passive mode decryption. You have to be inline to be able to establish a session, let alone then do decryption. So with TLS 1.3, as the industry is moving towards more and more adoption of TLS 1.3, and you'll also find out with post-quantum ciphers now in the news and now gaining adoption across browsers and applications, TLS 1.3 is the protocol of choice. TLS 1.3 brings in an encrypted server-side certificate, which makes it a protocol-level encryption for, of course, securing from eavesdropping into the SNI, matching with the SAN CN, or eavesdropping into the ALPN that's carried at the certificate level to the actual application and so on. But the idea here is more and more protocol headers are being encrypted. So considering a decryption program is not just to secure your payload, but also to be able to inspect any TLS evasion techniques, any SNI evasion techniques in itself. So it's extremely critical that you start thinking through a decryption program. All right, so we support TLS 1.3 decryption since PANOS 10.0, which is about like 3-4 years since the last 3-4 years at this point. Encrypted client hello is something that's still in its draft state. This is the encrypted server name indicator, ESNI, the predecessor name for it. It's still in its draft state. ECH is not something we support for decryption. So if a client actually tries to establish a session with ECH, we strip the ECH header and enable the client to retry. We send a reset where the client gets to, with the retry toggle enabled for the client set to retry. So the session is now established with a clear text SNI to make sure that we are able to map and match that SNI with the appropriate checks enabled on the decryption profile. If you are not using decryption, there are a few other ways in which you can disable ECH. We have a solution within the anti-spyware profile to detect a DNS resource record type of HTTPS or SVCB. If you enable that, that will also disable the ECH in client hellos. And of course, threat signatures to be able to detect and block the session itself. But of course, I know that most of our customers are not looking to block sessions. They're just trying to make sure that ECH is not in use on these client sessions. So typically, if decryption is enabled for those FQDNs, we'll take care of it by stripping it and the client retries, or you could use the anti-spyware profile for the client to retry as well. All right, so with Quick has been a very big innovation, of course, initiated by Google. It's been a very big initiative to optimize for streaming applications, particularly. So there's very low latency and low bandwidth consumption to even establish sessions, and session resumption is something that's very strongly promoted with the Quick protocol. While this is still under consideration within our team here, we very much look forward to enabling Quick decryption in the next few releases. However, this is not supported today. And we do notice that Quick is starting to gain adoption across streaming services, content delivery services, and also has some uptick in the 5G services in the telco areas. And so we are fully aware of that. We are tracking that, and we are working towards enabling that in the next few releases. But this is not something we support today. If you have decryption enabled on the Palo Alto firewall, Quick is also similar to ECH. Quick is stripped off, and the session is retried by the client on TLS 1.3, and the session continues successfully, just like any other TLS session. Okay, so DOH and DOT, DNS over HTTP and DNS over TLS. For those of you who are interested in this, this is particularly to secure DNS traffic. PAN-OS 11.0 was the first time we enabled the decryption and inspection of DOT and DOH traffic. It is not a default decryption configuration. You will need additional security license for a DNS security license specifically in order to enable this in the anti-spyware profile. Creating a decryption profile itself is easy to do, free of cost, but in order to enable DNS security beyond that, you will need a DNS security license. Decryption for both HTTP 1 and 2 are supported according to the RFC standard 8484 in terms of implementation. All right, so with that, what I want to take you through is a journey of what the quantum era is and what kind of ciphers are we looking at here. So it is now understood, it is not just merely a prediction, but it is going to be a reality in this decade, hopefully more, but as far as we keep learning from the advancements of quantum computing, we believe, based on what NIST and US government mandates have been pushing for, along with CNSA 2.0 timelines, within the next decade, there is a possibility and a very strong potential for a quantum computer to be able to break RSA 2K. All right, so that is potentially going to be possible. Now, with that, the kinds of concerns that we will run into is replacing cryptography, supported cryptographic ciphers across your endpoints, your applications, and your infrastructure. Any endpoint today that uses cryptography will need to be replaced to quantum-enabled ciphers or quantum-safe ciphers, which are known as post-quantum ciphers. All right. So all more modern PKI encryption is impacted. Key exchange, especially RSA Diffie-Hellman elliptical curves, are known to be broken by the Shor's algorithm. Long-term data privacy is the absolute concern. So the top level threat that the industry is facing today is the harvesting threat. So any data that's harvested in the last decade will be decrypted, and will have the threat actor or the nation state will have access to this data, making the shelf life of that data nil. So the kind of customized targeted attacks that can happen because of access to data is what the entire industry fears of. So considering that, now we have to start pushing towards a cybersecurity cryptographic hygiene practice, number one, as well as a migration to these post-quantum ciphers. And to that effect, NIST released the first three final standards last year, 24, where they made ML-Chem the choice of key exchange algorithm, and ML-DSA and stateless hash DSA as the two digital signatures. Of course, additional ciphers are in the draft stage for HQC for key exchange and Falcon for signature algorithm. And that should take some time, but as you can tell, there won't be a single key exchange that is the chosen one. In the last 30 years, RSA has been fairly reliable and has been supported across 100% of the endpoints and applications, right? Elliptical curve was something that only came into existence in the last 15 years and saw adoption in the last decade. But as you can tell now, there are going to be more than one key exchanges. In fact, more than two is what we believe key exchanges, and at least 3 different signature algorithms. And they're all based on different mathematical complex backgrounds. So you will see that NIST is going to push for more variety in key exchange and signature algorithms, just so that we don't land in this zone ever again. And should one of these mathematical algorithms not stand the test of time, then that you still have options, right? So that foundation of having options to be able to switch between algorithms is called crypto agility, and that is going to become critical. All right, with that, let's focus on the exact problem statement that we are trying to solve, or we have solved in the last year and a half. Of course, there are many more solutions that we are working on, and we are going to do a similar training in the next 6 months, and look forward to having all of you there as well. But the specific problem statement here is the challenge is that, of course, you have browsers that adopted PQC SSL sessions with the post-quantum ciphers. Now, browsers have adopted ML-Chem with a combination of the classical algorithm curve X25519, right? But in your infrastructure, you will see a growing amount of PQC-based SSL sessions. You may or may not have the right networking tools to actually bring visibility to these sessions. And so what we did at Palo Alto back in 2023 was enable threat signatures, which are not meant to alarm you, which are just informational threat signatures, to be able to identify these known sanctioned PQCs. But if they are unsanctioned in your infrastructure, because you want to make sure that decryption is enabled and you absolutely want to inspect all of your traffic or most of your traffic, especially to a specific given set of URLs or FQDNs, then we wanted to help you disable these PQCs that are in use, right? So first we started with threat signatures to even help you identify and give you control. You could do that with the security policy. And then we brought in decryption log enhancement to give you details of the exact PQC cipher that was being negotiated. Here's a screenshot of what it looks like. So as you can see on threat logs, we actually enabled the threat signatures to give you visibility into use of post-quantum cipher crystal kyber detected. And then within the decryption logs, it will also show you the actual curve. The EC negotiated curve column will actually show you the curve that was in use. And in case traffic was being decrypted, we make sure that PQC is stripped, just like I said, ECH is stripped or quick is stripped. Similarly, PQC is stripped. Any unsupported cipher or protocol is stripped, and the client is allowed to retry. So similarly, client, if only negotiated PQC, you see that such a log will be made available on decryption logs and so on. So this is a snapshot of the threat logs that were released back in 23.